everybody. Uhuru, welcome to this special event, bridging the gap between the white left and the Black liberation movement. My name is Brendan. I am a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, which was formed back in 1976 by the African People's Socialist Party, with the mandate that we organize other white people to build the movement of reparations and genuine solidarity with the liberation of African people. That is our assignment, and we work under the direct leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. Before we get started, if you are tuning in on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe to get alerts whenever we go live or post a new video. If you are tuning in on Facebook, please share this live stream with friends. Let us know in the comments where you are tuning in from. We have a Q&A later in the program, so be sure to take notes and enter your questions in the Q&A feature on Zoom or in the comments on YouTube or Facebook. Again, the understanding of white solidarity with Black power is something we need to spread everywhere across the planet. So please subscribe to the Uhuru Solidarity channel and share with others. I want to let people know that this event is a fundraiser for the Uhuru Solidarity Center, where we are right now. This is the national headquarters of the Solidarity Movement. It's a beautiful organizing center located on the south side of St. Louis with a big banner along the front, which reads "Unity Through Reparations." This building is owned by the party's Black Star Industries. And tonight we have a goal to raise $500. So please go to apscuhuru.org/donate, and we'll put that in the chat everywhere. In today's event, we will hear a presentation from APSC Chair Penny Hess and Uhuru Solidarity Movement Chair Jesse Neville. They will be joined by Chairman Omali Yeshitela. The Chairman, Penny, and Jesse make up the Uhuru Three, who are being targeted by the U.S. government for working for African liberation and reparations from the white community under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. I want to salute our leadership, the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, Omali Yeshitela, who developed the political theory of African internationalism and who represents the leadership of the African Revolution around the world. I salute Deputy Chair Onezene Yeshitela, who coordinates the economic development work of the movement, including the incredibly inspiring Black Power Blueprint programs in St. Louis, Missouri. If you haven't seen them, be sure to come out, make a trip to St. Louis and take a tour. I would also like to salute and welcome APSC Chairwoman Penny Hess and USM Chair Jesse Neville. Uhuru, and welcome you two.
Yes, it's very exciting to be here. Thank you, Brendan, so much. And I'm excited about having this study that we call Bridging the Gap Between the White Left and the African Liberation Movement. Chairman, we are so, pardon me? Oh, I need to have my camera on. Okay. Thank you. Is that on now?
Yes.
Okay.
There we go.
So I just really want to say that we are honored to have with us Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Chairman, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I think that this is going to be a very important discussion and study, and there will be an opportunity for people to ask questions and put in comments a little bit later. So, what we want to do is get started. And again, I want to salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela, leader of the African nation, who has spent his life forwarding the very serious and ambitious goal of the total liberation of Africa and African people inside the US and everywhere around the world. And we're taking on this event tonight in the context of the state attacks on the African People's Socialist Party, the raids that happened in 2022, which, by the way, I thought we were going to show that video, but maybe we aren't. And the the raids on the party on seven locations, including the chairman and deputy chair's home, and the Uhuru House, the Uhuru Solidarity Center in 2022, followed by indictments and as we most recently learned this past week, the denial of the motion to dismiss. And as of this time, we are facing trial as part of the counterinsurgency that we're going to talk about tonight. So, you know, it's really important that we understand this and we understand how we can have a principled relationship to the struggle of African people. You know, first of all, I want to salute the chairman again, who is my leadership, our leadership. The leader of the African People's Solidarity Committee is the African People's Socialist Party. And I also want to salute Deputy Chair Onezene Shatella. And just to say that today there was a magnificent press conference that was about ushering in another of the amazing institutions of the Black Power Blueprint, or fronts of the Black Power Blueprint, a new building that has just been purchased in the north side in the West Florissant corridor, as we call it, that is going to serve as a restaurant and a kitchen. It's just going to be so great. So yeah, it was very exciting to see that, and just really want to salute Onezene Shatella, the deputy chair of the African People's Socialist Party, who leads the whole economic front of the party. And many of us in the African People's Solidarity Committee work directly under the leadership of Deputy Chair's office or the chairman's office. So yes, very exciting. We want to say that you can join both the Uhuru Solidarity Movement by going to uhurusolidarity.org and the African People's Solidarity Committee, which is a cadre organization that's there saying that we will carry out our mission behind enemy lines in the white colonizer population as part of the solidarity front of the African Revolution. We have the honor to be. You can be part of this. It's very, very, very exciting to understand this. So, you know, we want to also salute all of the comrades and friends of the Uhuru movement, some of whom are in and part of white left organizations. We're not here to do any mudslinging or any kind of unprincipled attacks, but we do want to understand the opportunism that is present in the white left, in the organization of the white left in relationship to the African liberation movement. And this is something that Chairman Omale Shatella has written extensively about. We're going to be reading today from this powerful book from the first Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. This book was written in 1981, so that's 40 years ago, Chairman, and it could be written. We would just, where it talks about Reagan, we would just say Biden now, but other than that, it is completely applicable to the situation in the world today. So what we want to understand is the question of opportunism of the white left in relationship to the African liberation movement. The African People's Solidarity Committee, again, is an organization of white people under the leadership of the party. It was founded by the party in 1976. We work under their leadership. We are the Solidarity Front, to reiterate that, to be the voice of Black power in white face inside the colonizer population. And the existence of APSC, the foundation of it, is based on the party's understanding of colonialism and the colonial mode of production, that everything that we experience, that African people are part of the colonial mode of production, white people are, it is what defines the social system that we live in today, also known as parasitic capitalism. The fact that there is nothing that we have or see or understand, or nothing that is part of the superstructure of this colonial mode of production that is not connected to, that is not part of the reality that this system is built on the assault on Africa, on the enslavement and kidnapping of African people, and on the genocide of the indigenous people, the theft of their land, and the colonial domination of the majority of the people of the world. And the understanding that colonialism is not a bad policy. It is not a policy. It is not something that happened in the past. It is something that that we can say that is alive and well today. This is the essence of the system that we are fighting. So when we talk about the left, we are talking about what the chairman and the African People's Socialist Party is called ideological imperialism, a term the party coined for the white left, the role of the white left in defining and controlling the political definitions of colonized peoples, and being part of uniting with a counterinsurgency by the US government that crushed their struggles in the 1960s and continues that attack today. Also, the ability of the white left to control resources. So the existence of the African People's Solidarity Committee under the leadership of the party creates a principled relationship, an opportunity for the leadership, for white people to have a principled relationship to African people, enabling us to make our self-criticism and to see that the road to socialism is painted black for everyone, for white people too. The existence of APSC gives the party, the African Liberation Movement, control over the resources. As part of our mission is to retrieve the stolen resources and return them to African people in the form of reparations. And this is what we mean when we say reparations. It's returning. It's not a favor. It's not something out of charity, but it's what is owed to African people. Chairman Omali Yeshitela founded the African People's Socialist Party in 1972.
But you'll be talking.
Excuse me. Somebody needs to, somebody mute. I'm sorry. Yeah, so the African People's Socialist Party was founded in 1972 in a period when the US government was carrying out programs of counterinsurgency against the African Liberation Movement of the 60s. The driving stated goal, the ambitious goal of the party, was to complete the Black Revolution of the 1960s, which was a vibrant mass movement led by African people that was crushed by the US government colonial secret police. This is what counterinsurgency is: a war against an oppressed people, a war against the colonized, against a just struggle or rising up of colonized people for freedom and independence from colonial domination. Counterinsurgencies have no Geneva Convention to set the boundaries for warfare. Anything goes. And this is what we see happening with the rising up of the Palestinian people right now, that is being carried out by the settler colonial state of Israel against the Palestinian uprising right now. This is counterinsurgency, what they are doing to the Palestinian people, and slaughtering and destroying the infrastructure of what society was there, the right of the Palestinian people to their own land. One of the things that was exposed in the 1970s was what is called the COINTELPRO, the Counterintelligence Program, a government program that was waged in the 1960s by the colonial government, US government, which has at its goal the plan to neutralize the Black Power movement, the Black Liberation Movement of the 60s. It also targeted the anti-colonial movements, including the American Indian Movement, the Puerto Rican Liberation Movement, with tactics including slander, the assassination of leaders and the main voices of the movement, and to destroy the organizations of the anti-colonial Black Liberation Movement of the 60s, the most powerful social movement and force of that period within US borders. And while some left groups felt the heat of this COINTELPRO, its main target was the revolutionary center of the entire revolutionary period.
Recording in progress.
All right, okay, good. So, yeah, so I just wanted to read, and then I want to read a little bit from this incredible book by the chairman, but this thing about COINTELPRO, it was covert. This is a definition that I saw online, and I think it's pretty interesting because it's saying that COINTELPRO was covert and often used, quote, extra legal means to criminalize various forms of political struggle and derail social movements such as those, quote, this is a quote, so it's saying for civil rights, the Black Power movement, and the Puerto Rican independence movement. In 1975, there was the Church Committee of the US government that investigated some of this, quote unquote, and one of their findings said, and this is a quote from the Church Committee, it said, many of the techniques used, meaning of COINTELPRO, would be intolerable in a democratic society, even if all the targets had been involved in, quote, violent activity. But COINTELPRO went far beyond that. The FBI conducted a sophisticated vigilante operation aimed squarely at preventing the exercise of First Amendment rights of speech and association on the theory that preventing the growth of dangerous groups and the propagation of dangerous ideas would protect the national security and deter violence. I mean, that sounds like something right out of our indictment, you know, to the whole question of the First Amendment rights to speech and association. So I'm talking about the counterinsurgency against the African liberation movement because in the 70s, in the wake of the defeat, the white left rose to prominence on the backs of African people at the expense of African people. The white left isolated the African liberation movement and essentially collaborated with the US government attack on the African liberation movement, which destroyed the movement as it had been then. But Chairman Omali Yeshitela was alive and in political life, and he fought fiercely to go up against the headwinds, to rebuild the fighting capacity of a movement so crushed that, as the chairman has remarked, you could still smell the cordite in the air. The chairman fought to keep alive the clarity that the struggle of African people as an oppressed nation is against colonialism, the political and economic domination of a whole people by a foreign and alien state power and people for economic benefit for the colonizer population. It is not racism, which is something that the white left attempted to, you know, reimpose upon the movement. And really, racism is a hideous concept that Black people can be saved by white people, by the thoughts in the heads of the white population. But as the chairman has said and keeps struggling for, African people have agency. They struggle, they lead this movement, they lead the struggle against the colonial capitalist system, the leading force, and the African liberation movement is the movement that can and will usher in socialism inside of the world itself. The white left has played a role of the ideological mop-up operation and rose to prominence at the defeat of the African Revolution as ideological imperialists. So, you know, I want to read a quote here, and then we're gonna show a clip of a white leftist from The Answer PSL tendency or organization, and just, you know, be able to critique it and talk about it a little bit. And we're going to have Chairman Omali just summing up. But I do want to just quote from this important book, A New Beginning, The Road to Black Freedom and Socialism, the main resolution of the Constitution and program adopted at the first Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. And again, that was in 1981. And the chairman says, and I want to, I'm sorry.
This book was just in the way. Couldn't see.
Oh, this is the, okay, that green spot, all right. So, sorry, I have to have this done. So it is saying, the chairman says, and this is so eloquent, and I know Comrade Virginia, who's on, loves this book and this quote, and was really excited that we were going to be talking about it tonight. But this quote, which I love very much, and it's saying, the chairman says, living in a country built and sustained off slavery, colonialism, and neocolonialism, the impact of victorious revolutionary struggle reaches down into the gas tanks, shopping centers, and tax brackets of the North American population. There is an objective relationship between world slavery and US affluence, and up until now, the North American population, opportunistically and demagogically, led by their stomachs, pocketbooks, and corrupt leadership, have chosen the continued enslavement of the world. And we're saying that there are many, many white people who don't want to be part of choosing the continued enslavement of the world, who want to be part, who want to be part of a new world in which African people are free and liberated, in which the Palestinian people are free, the indigenous people have the return of their land. But there is a science to how that has to happen, and it cannot happen under white leadership. In the US, imperialism was constructed off the enslavement of African people and the near decimation of the native population. The system has been the cornerstone of world capitalism since the Second Imperialist War, which means, among other things, that the resources, the wealth, the near slave labor of the vast majority of the peoples of the world have been the basis for the development, not only the wealth of the ruling class, and we're going to talk about that again in a minute, but of the entire North American society. Consequently, the bases of opportunism within the US are very deep. The opportunism of the North American people, reflected in the political opportunism of the North American left, remains the primary contradiction which prevents the unity of the North American working class and the African liberation movement and our struggle for independence through self-liberation. And I think that that is really, really important to understand, because a lot of white people in the White House are always talking about unity, and why doesn't the African liberation movement follow their leadership?
Right.
You know, as socialists. But the chairman is turning history right side up and saying that it is the opportunism of white people in the white left that prevents the unity of the North American working class. Or at a later period, the chairman has said that the real working class in the world is the African working class, the colonized working class, and that all white people sit on the pedestal of the oppression of the colonial domination of African people, as we are the colonizers. And the chairman is saying this opportunism is also the main contradiction confronting the development of the struggle for socialism within US borders. And this opportunism also stands in the way of a meaningful fight back against the imperialist counteroffensive under the leadership, and he says Ronald Reagan, we would say Joseph Biden and his war cabinet. Yep. Historically, the Black liberation movement has led the struggle against US imperialism from within US borders. It has been responsible for the most fundamental social progress within the US and has acted as a vanguard for the struggle of other peoples and struggles within the US, as well as Africa, the Caribbean, and other places throughout the world. if you have questions, by the way, please put them in the chat and we will go over them a little bit later. The basic modern concepts of civil liberties within the US were those won by the Black Liberation Movement. And again, this is something that is connected to our indictment and everything else, that it's not the Russians that told the African People's Socialist Party to fight for reparations and civil liberties of African people. It is the Black Liberation Movement that has been the leadership of that. So the chairman is saying the basic civil liberties within the US were those won by the Black Liberation Movement in the 50s and 60s, and they're being overturned now. And they were saying by the Reagan administration and continue to be by the Biden administration today. During the 60s, the potency of the colonial contradiction within the US resulted in African people setting the torch to scores of cities throughout the US and giving the North American left the ideological and political basis for a progressive North American movement. However, the North American left, which achieved its identity from the Black Liberation Movement of the 50s and 60s, was soon to rear its opportunistic head in objective unity with the US capitalist colonialist state, which unleashed the full fury of its deadly repressive power on the heads of oppressed Black people and the Black Liberation Movement. The internationally isolated Black Liberation Movement inexperienced and without solid ideological and theoretical grounding and a general revolutionary program was virtually crushed by a US military assault that reached its effective peak during the late 60s and early 70s, resulting in scores of African patriots murdered, others forced into exile, and even more. And how many we don't know, locked up in genocidal prison camps throughout the US today. The response of the North American left was never to follow the leadership of this vital dynamic movement, nor has it ever been. Instead, its efforts went towards controlling it, and historically, when this has failed, to destroy it. Nor was the situation different following the military assault on our movement in the 60s and 70s. Some of the better known North American left formations of today were created during this period, not in unity with the Black Liberation Movement, nor under their leadership, but at its expense. And I want to say that, and that is why the African People's Socialist Party created the Solidarity Front, the movement under the leadership of the party tied to a day-to-day leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, with the mandate to go into the white community, return the stolen resources, and forward the African People's Socialist Party's goal to win the total liberation of Africa and African people everywhere, and to destroy the system of the colonial mode of production, the parasitic capitalism, ushering in the leadership of African people in creating socialism in the world through national liberation, and winning other white people to stand on that side of history, and recognizing that it is in our interest to be under the leadership of the party. So, we're going to talk about we want to look at this group Answer and the PSL, I think that is the Party for Socialism and Liberation it's called. We're gonna have some more, maybe a part 2 of this next month, where we also want to talk about then Prairie Fire Organizing Committee and the struggle, this blue book that the chairman wrote, and the struggle of that the party waged against this opportunism of this entity that was called the New Left, that was, ostensibly, according to its own statements, was distinguished itself from the old left by being committed to solidarity with the liberation of national liberation of colonized peoples. So I'm going to turn it over to Comrade Jesse, and he's going to talk a little bit about the answer and the PSL and the struggles that the party has had very recently with them and their role within the white left.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairwoman Penny Hess, for that brilliant presentation to open up this extremely important study. And I'm really honored to be a part of this and excited to be a part of this discussion and this study here with Chairman Omali Yeshitela, our leadership. And I want to join you in saluting our Chairman Omali Yeshitela and Deputy Chair Onizane Yeshitela, as well as Representative Bakri Olatunji of the African People's Socialist Party, who's in the room with us, Comrade Akenge, and everybody who's here. And you know, what an important opportunity this is for us as white people to be exposed to the teachings of African internationalism developed by Chairman Omali Yeshitela. So I again appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this this event tonight. And what we are going to be looking at now is a very recent example of the struggle with the opportunism of the white left that was just laid out so eloquently by Chairwoman Penny, particularly as it had manifested itself in the past year in the form of an organization that calls itself the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And there's also something called the Answer Coalition, which is essentially the mass organization of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. The Party for Socialism and Liberation was co-founded by a white leftist named Brian Becker, who is also the director of the Answer Coalition. And I wanted to just quickly, for people who don't know much about the background of PSL and think that it is something new, I wanted to just pull up a diagram that shows you the political ancestry, if you will, of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. One thing that you will see, you know, the chairman has said that what often expresses itself, what has historically expressed itself as the white left, or as so-called class struggle within the colonizer white population, has actually been a contest between contending segments of the colonial settler white population for control of the stolen resources of African people and the stolen land of the indigenous people and the stolen resources of colonized people around the world. And within that struggle between settler colonizer entities, within the white left, you have even more micro struggles amongst the colonizer left over how to implement opportunism in relationship to the struggle of African people to be free from colonialism. So the Party for Socialism and Liberation was a splinter group that split off from a previous and still existing white left Marxist organization called the Workers' World Party, which itself was a split from the Socialist Workers' Party, which itself was a split from the Communist Party USA that rose to prominence in this country through collaborating with the FBI's attack and ultimate defeat and destruction of the movement led by Marcus Garvey for the liberation and unification of Africa and African people worldwide. So the PSL's roots go directly back to that. And if you are confused by this, this image here, brace yourselves for, let's zoom out a little bit to see the broader constellation of the white left. If we go to the next slide. So here you have, and the PSL is in here, you have further examples again of the disputes amongst the white left on how to go about pursuing the agenda of, you know, white-led socialism, or as the chairman has said, socialist colonialism. We're going to look at a statement that was given by Brian Becker. But before we do that, for anyone who was not familiar with the struggles that took place, and we can end this slide, over the past few months, in the lead up to a historic 15th annual Black People's March on the White House, coordinated by the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace and Reparations, which is comprised of almost 20 African anti-imperialist organizations under the leadership of the coalition's founder and chairman, Omali Yeshitela, which has held an annual Black People's March on the White House for the past 15 years. And every single year has called upon the white left, the white so-called anti-war or peace movement to come out and say victory to African and oppressed peoples, victory to Iraq, victory to Afghanistan, victory to Palestine, and to recognize the fundamental wars of occupation and terror waged by the US colonial state against African, indigenous, Mexican, and oppressed peoples inside the borders of the US as the foundation of the system that is oppressing colonized people around the world.
And it's always on the same weekend.
On the same weekend, every year, same time, same place,
Yes.
Washington, DC, Malcolm X
First
Park,
weekend of
March to the
December-
White House
of
of
November.
November.
Yeah.
And what you have is that the PSL and the Answer Coalition never responded to invitations over the course of 15 years to participate. And then on November 4th of this year, after having received multiple invitations, not only to attend the Black People's March on the White House, but to have speakers come and address the rallies and the marches. Because this year's March on the White House was held in the context of the Hands Off Uhuru fight back. It had long-term overall political goals, which the coalition has been pursuing all along, but it had specific political objectives in the form of raising support for the case of the Uhuru Three and pushing back and neutralizing and defeating the US government's very real and very dangerous intentions to put Chairman Omali Yeshitela in prison for the rest of his life for fighting for the liberation of African people. In response to the call to bridge the gap between the white left and the African liberation movement by coming over and marching with and building the Black People's March on the White House, the PSL and the Answer Coalition instead gathered a group of organizations together that included Palestinian organizations and announced a march on the White House around the question of Palestine on the same day, at the same time, and in the same location as the Black People's March on the White House that had been planned, again, for over a year and which had been held every year for 15 years. And this was an incredibly insidious attack that was made against the Black People's March on the White House, not only because it was a contending demonstration held on the same day, at the same time, in the same place, but because it was an effort by the white left to split the African liberation movement and the Palestinian people, natural allies and long-term allies in the struggle against colonialism, which is their shared enemy, from each other by separating and isolating the Palestinian struggle as something apart from the struggle against colonialism led by the African liberation movement. The Black is Back Coalition has had on its platform and in its demands the liberation of Palestine for the entirety of its existence. And this year's Black People's March on the White House was 100% a march for Gaza and a march for a free Palestine. So this was an example of the opportunism and interventionism of the white left really being exposed to full view. And one thing I want to say quickly before we look at this clip from Brian Becker, who again is the puppet master behind the many different front organizations of the PSL and Answer, is that the chairman said in a study recently that ideological imperialism, which is, the white left's imposition of its control, of its ideological and other forms of control over the struggle of colonized people, it reflects the relationship that white people have to imperialism as colonizers. So what PSL and Answer did, as the chairman explained, is a perfect example of that. Because they have access to millions of dollars, they have access to loudspeakers and stages and printing They have access to permits and buses. They bus people from all around. They could have bused people from all around the country to participate in a Black People's March on the White House to free the Uhuru Three and to free Palestine as one united struggle against colonialism. But they use their access to resources in this colonialist and interventionist and opportunist fashion. And this was a perfect example of that. So I also want to mention that the unity between the Palestinian and struggle and the African People's Socialist Party goes back decades. You can find in the online archives of the Burning Spear articles about presentations that the chairman gave before an audience of over 500 Palestinian students in San Francisco in 1981, where people cheered and stomped and had a tremendous outpouring of love and appreciation and respect for the chairman, who stood before this audience of hundreds of Palestinian people and said, quote, "The blood of Palestine will nurture the seeds of revolution around the world."
Wow,
Those are the
so
words
awesome.
of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. So let's take a look now at this clip of Brian Becker, who is again the co-founder of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the leader of the Answer Coalition. This is from an interview that was held last year in which he's responding to a question from the person interviewing him, Jared Ball, who asks Becker to respond to skepticism that African people might feel about working with a white-led organization such as the PSL and Answer. So this is Brian Becker's response. We're going to come back and talk about this a little bit and then be very excited to open this up to Chairman Omali Yeshitela. So let's take a look.
Yeah, well, you weren't the only trend. I mean, you know, race is the dominant element in American politics. I mean, I'm a socialist, I'm a Marxist. Like Marx said in the beginning of the Communist Manifesto, the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggle. So I'm all about that. But the class struggle in the United States has been dominated by the issue of racism. And the class struggle in the United States has been dominated by the super oppression of the Black working class and the Black community or Black nation, whatever formulation one feels comfortable with, since the beginning. I mean, this capitalism, unlike European capitalism, I mean, the European bourgeoisie had to fight against feudalism. The European bourgeoisie was an oppressed class in Europe under the feudal monarchists, and eventually they had to overthrow them. They had revolutions like the French Revolution and so on and so forth. In the United States, the bourgeoisie was not oppressed as a class. It didn't really have a progressive function. And essentially, its ability to survive as a settler ruling class in the Americas was based on the super oppression of the indigenous population and the kidnapping of Africans. And that's the dominant trend. You look throughout the 400 years of the US class struggle, the centrality of the Black struggle for freedom and equality and justice and liberation is dominant. So to the extent that there's also not a huge track record of white and Black people fighting together in a way that is satisfying to the Black community over time. I mean, there have been cases of it. That I think the CP, the Communist Party in the 30s, made huge progress, especially in the South, but in the North too. But, you know, the hesitancy or skepticism from folks in the Black community working with white organizations or organizations that have white people in leadership, because the Answer Coalition was never, you know, we never accepted the idea that we were a white organization. We were predominantly a people of color organization, actually. We were Koreans and Palestinians, lots of Black people who were in the leadership. And in that many of our events, the white participation was a minority participation. But that said, you know, there is white leadership. So like I would take from your point of view, I understand that point of view, but I also think whatever the historical problems of building unity, it is actually critically important if it's done on the correct basis. There should not be unity for unity's sake. There should not be unity that puts the quote class struggle above the struggle for Black freedom, for instance. Like, that's BS from my point of view. Like, that's not the way we think. That's not how the Answer Coalition thinks. That's certainly not the way the PSL thinks. And, you know, most of our leadership is young Black and Latino and Asian American people who completely would never join an organization that did that. But, you know, we do have to find ways on a principled basis to build unity. Why? Only to win. Like, it's, from my point of view, the struggle for multinational, or what might be called in American society, multiracial unity, bottom line is, how do you defeat the capitalist system? What's the most effective way? And having unity around the Democratic Party is not a way to defeat the capitalist system. Building multiracial unity around the Clintons or around any of the Democrats is not the way. But if there's a basis for a united front against imperialism and the capitalist system, based on solidarity and based on values and principles that we all agree to, then it's very, very critically important.
True. So, yeah, so we want to discuss that.
Yeah.
I just want to say, before we go on, and
Yes,
I
yeah.
know Jesse has some other things to say, and then we're going to be able to have the chairman, I just wanted to read a comment from Kat Lawson, who's on, and Uhuru Kat, and she's saying, love and peace. This is a great and educational webinar. It definitely has made me think more deeply about these contradictions and harmful behaviors. I'm sorry these organizations made such an awful opportunist choice. Anyway, I think that, yeah, I appreciate that, because that's what we're saying. And you know, it's pretty clear from seeing Becker's statement that he's talking about the continuation of white people who are the colonizers in this colonial system continuing to be the leadership of the colonized people with, you know, a different name of some kind of socialism, and understanding that Nazism was National Socialism, and, you know, colonialism that has exists. So I don't know if you have a few more things that you were gonna.
Yes, I'll be quick, because I'm very excited to hear from our chairman, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. But just in terms of this video, I think, you know, one of the things we wanted to say is that you know, you might hear what Becker says in this video and think that some of those concepts sound something like what you might expect to hear from the Uhuru movement. Perhaps, you know, when he says things about the centrality of the Black struggle, or when he says
Those are
that
things he's taken.
yes,
He's
things he's appropriating and stealing
Yeah.
from in order to attack the leadership
Mhm.
and interests of the African working class being in the center of the struggle for socialism. But the thing that I think is key is where he says, that said, there's white leadership, and gestures towards himself. And he could literally say anything. And he could literally talk about how it's a colonial mode of production built on the enslavement of African people, and blah, 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 and then end it with, that said, there's white leadership. And that's kind of the crux that explains, that reveals the fundamental distinction between the white left and the African working class led struggle against colonial capitalism, which is the precondition for the emergence of genuine socialism. As the chairman says, the road to socialism is painted black. And I think, you know, there's a lot more we could say. One quick thing I wanted to say, and then just kind of end this part, is that the term super oppression, I think, is worth honing in on, because he talks about the fact that first he says that the European bourgeoisie basically was progressive, because the European bourgeoisie fought for its freedom from the feudal
He says
monarchy.
it was oppressed.
Yeah, it was oppressed.
Yeah.
It was an oppressed class. doesn't mention the actual oppressed class of the colonized billions of human beings whose oppression and exploitation made it possible for the European bourgeoisie to emancipate itself from the feudal monarchy and as the chairman teaches us, transition from feudalism to capitalism, that the missing link of colonialism. He doesn't mention the word colonialism at all, but also this concept of super oppression. The chairman has already dealt with this concept that Marxists, this is a quote from Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Marxists refer to the colonial exploitation of African people as a super exploitation. So what happens to white people is the regular exploitation. What happens to Africans is the super exploitation, accruing super profits for imperialism. But the chairman says there is nothing super about it. It is the norm under colonialism, under colonial capitalism. The exceptional reality, the super experience, if you will, is that of the white worker who is underexploited. It's not that the Africans are super exploited, it's that they are exploited under colonialism and the white worker is underexploited compared to the normal rate of exploitation suffered by the African worker. And finally, I think it is incredibly revealing that when addressing this idea that there's not a good track record of white support for Black liberation, but Becker gives as an exception the Communist Party of the 1930s, which means that they would have just wrapped up their participation in the FBI frame-up and imprisonment of Marcus Garvey, in which the Communist Party was 100% complicit and involved. So that tells you basically everything you need to know right there. So I'll stop it there.
Thank you, Comrade Jesse. And Chairman, I'm very excited to be able to have you here today. It's an honor to have you. So appreciate your input.
Well, thank you very much. I want to really express appreciation for this discussion as well. And it's a discussion that's happening into 21st century quite a bit differently than it did happen in the 60s and later. There were actual physical battles that happened between people of the African liberation movement and people who call themselves white leftists, white anti-imperialists, etc. There's the kind of arrogance and that came with an imperial attitude that approached the African people, that it is born of a relationship. It is not born because people just woke up with bad ideas or this answer that Becker is looking for about how you can find this principal relationship. It seemed quite simple to me that from the history of this country, he can mention that this country talk about settlers. Yeah, he's talking about white people, settlers, and the indigenous people are not settlers. There's no mention that. How does that relate to the indigenous people? All the settlers are sucking the blood, the resources that come from the indigenous people here. What does that have to do with Leonard Peltier, who's locked up in a prison right now? What would the difference be for Leonard Peltier in his case if, in fact, he didn't have to fight simply because he is accused of committing some kind of crime against a military force that attacked him and his people on their equivalent of a Gaza right here in the United States? What would the difference be, if there was that kind of unity? But you don't recognize that. So there's this case of Leonard Peltier as an example on the one hand. But then there's this thing that he recognized as settlers who are not involved. And I don't hear Becker, I don't hear Ansel or anybody else trying to mobilize the settlers to unite with the struggle of indigenous people, which would have to be part of the struggle to free Leonard Peltier. They would probably, as a consequence of this discussion, find a way to say, hey, free Leonard Peltier. They may have had some junks that said free Leonard Peltier, but they separate the struggle of Leonard Peltier from the oppression of the indigenous people, which gave rise, which is a consequence of settlers. Settlerism. Becker is a part of the settlers. The white population here are settlers. I'm talking about a structural relationship here, not just name calling or anything like that, which might have happened in the 60s. We did a lot of that. And I think that we've achieved a much better scientific approach to the question today than we had then. But when we talk about opportunism, I think it's important to work with the definition here. Because when we say opportunism, we mean this tendency to sell out, to sacrifice the long-term interest, if you will, of the working class for the interests of a special or a privileged or a sector. That sometimes the Marxists have referred to them a certain way, a sector of the bourgeoisie, a sector of the working class that was better off than the rest of the workers. Let's assume that there is this kind of relationship here. So what is happening what about the settlers? What about the long-term interests of the people, of the indigenous people? When you find yourself talking about how do we get around this question? How do we find this principal relationship? Becker is searching for it. This principal relationship with Black people, with the colonized people. He said, that ain't hard, Becker. That ain't hard. John Brown discovered it quickly. John Brown was one of those people who say, hey, what we got to do is we got to join with this struggle against the enslaved African people, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's not what Becker did. Becker said, let's not do that. Let's block recognition of the significance of the African liberation movement by pitting the struggle of Palestinians who are brutally oppressed, murdered on a regular basis all the time, been going for more than 100 years. And who was in front in this country of the struggle of the Palestinian people? Was it the white people? Was it the white left? Was it the Communist Party? Any of them? No. Malcolm X was in Gaza in 1954. Yes. You know, Martin Luther King was even in Gaza, etc. Though King didn't unite, Malcolm united with the Palestinian Revolution, etc. Black people did this historically. The war that was made against the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in the 1967 as a consequence coming down on the side of Palestine during the so-called Six-Day War. All the white left and all the white liberals took their resources away. This is the relationship between Palestinian oppressed and colonized people and Africans and oppressed colonized people. But you got this settler, there's got this population. And we're talking about a colonial relationship, and that's really important to understand. We're not talking about racism. We're not talking about people of color, what have you. I don't even know what the hell a people of color is. We're talking about colonized people. We're talking this notion of racism, this notion of people of color is an attempt to liquidate the national liberation movement. So I don't have an identity. I'm a people of color. You know, I'm a race now. I'm not a part of a national liberation movement. I'm a race. And there's no such thing as racial liberation. This is something that a narcissistic kind of left population that in using Marx's term, is a consequence of a superstructure born of a colonial mode of production. The economic base of this whole social system, not just here, but throughout the world, Europe too. The European struggle against what ended feudalism was not some bourgeoisie who popped up, etc. What created the bourgeoisie? What made it possible for this sector to become enriched, more richer than even than the nobility, to challenge the status quo in a feudal Europe? What did it was started 600 years ago when Portugal left Portugal. This almost non-entity left Portugal and initiated the process of enslaving African people and transferring us against our will around the world. This is where the whole colonial process began. Yeah. This is the foundation of the capitalist system. Karl Marx once said, speaking of the workers, if you will, because Becker quotes Marx, you know, about how the question is, since the beginning of time or some stuff like that. But Karl Marx also said that wage slavery in Europe, wage slavery in Europe. He's talking about the beginning of this thing that happened in Europe that they call wage slavery, and that's an interesting name. Wage slavery in Europe has as a pedestal slavery pure and simple in the New World. And then it's a non sequitur. After having said that, it's a non sequitur to say, therefore, to end this system, this wage slavery, what you have to do is to somehow the industrial working class has to overthrow the industrial ruling class. That's a non sequitur. But Marx, and we appreciate Marx, but We also understand that Marx was born into a process just like everybody else. He's not free from the consequences of the social system within which he was born. Even as he was writing Capital, he was doing it as a consequence of getting money to support himself from Engels' father, who got his money from cotton plantations where black people were picking cotton. So it was black people picking cotton that fed Karl Marx when he was writing Capital, right? That's where he described the world. And he describes us out of the world in an unpleasant and unfortunate kind of way. So the thing is not to throw bricks at Marx or even at Brian Becker. I mean, it's a wasted brick. You understand? It's not to do that. It's to be able to explore this thing in a scientific way. And I think we're in a much better place to handle this discussion today than we were yesterday. I appreciate what Kat, offered in terms of how she understands that this is a great discussion. It's something that should educate us, take us to a higher level of understanding, because we want to end this damn social system. But ending the social system, we have to understand, what does it mean? Can you imagine the capitalism that Becker hates even coming into existence? Can you imagine the existence of capitalism without the stolen land of the indigenous people? Can you imagine the existence of this social system without the enslavement of African people here and around the world? It's not even impossible to imagine that. So the starting point cannot be where Becker wants to take it. It's not because Becker read a book, therefore, right. It's like in the beginning there was the Word. And the Word was, you heard that before, haven't you? Yeah. But no. We're materialists, Becker. And so we don't work with it in that fashion. So we do think Karl Marx had a lot to say, and that was really important. He said, for example, he characterized what we recognize as the colonial mode of production. He said, you got to be able to say where this thing started, Becker. And he said that part of it had to do with turning Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of black skin. He called this primitive accumulation. And then he talked about how it meant the war that was being made against East India, the brutality that was imposed on East India. He's talking about the whole continent of India, where 50 million people were murdered during the process of doing this. He's talking about interring the indigenous people here into the mines, et cetera, bringing up gold and silver that gave birth to this. This is the wealth. This is the primitive accumulation that he's talking about. But this land that we sit on was a part of the primitive accumulation as well. You cannot even imagine the existence of this system without this stuff happening. And yet you would negate its reality. And he said this primitive accumulation, he said, has the same significance in political economy as original sin in theology. This is where the whole thing started. Adam bit the apple, and then sin, befell, the people on earth, etc. Some nonsense like that. And Marx said that's crazy. It doesn't work like that. And this is the point that we want to make to Becker, that you got to be able to look concretely at the reality. And we don't expect Becker to do it, because Lenin once said that in terms of opportunism, he once said that an honest opportunist is the worst kind. He said because it's motivated by conviction. And so Becker is not the worst kind. Yeah. This has nothing to do with conviction. No. It's duplicity that we're looking at here. And so we are saying that people don't have to ride on that boat, that you can move in unity and solidarity with the colonized peoples around the world. And in this country, everybody knows how America came into existence. You can't even find an indigenous person walking down the streets in this country. They are in these concentration camps that's referred to as Indian reservations. This is the Gaza. This is the open air prison that you're talking about, where Leonard Peltier was arrested by the IDF of this area, who went in and attacked the indigenous people there. Becker, and we said Becker, sounds like. I just think it's important. So anyway, I think it's important you know, to get to the science of this thing. So we're just not calling names. We want to make this struggle. And I really appreciate the existence of the solidarity movement here. I say here, but everywhere we located, we're in 140 some odd cities in this country. It's the solidarity force yourselves. And I know and people who are familiar with us don't have the slightest idea probably of the kinds of fights that we had to go through in the process of creating this organization and what we've gone through and the assaults, the slander that was thrown both at the Solidarity Forces and at the African People's Socialist Party. The Solidarity Forces, Jesse, were characterized at one time when we were first organized as white lesbians working under the leadership of black men. That was the Jesse, and then so that was a form of slander, you know. And then we had this what was characterized as this ultra leftist communist organization said it won't work. That white people working under the leadership of black people because white workers won't work, have to work in their own interest. Somehow they won't betray their own interest. Like, how in the hell can a communist like Becker say that it's not in their own interest to work under the leadership of the African workers, etc.? How can it not be in the interest of white workers, of white people to work under the leadership of African workers when what we are hearing from the Marxists is that the whole revolutionary movement is led by whom? The workers of the world. Who better defines what a worker is in the world than an African whose labor has built this entire system that we're talking about? This is so clear. It's so obvious, it seems to me. It can be without help, without explanation. Kat, I hope you're getting the points that we're making here all down the line. So there was all kind of controversy here. And then, you know, from the African liberation movement too, because much of the African liberation movement at a particular time, as people do, we accept how reality is defined by the oppressor. So the oppressor comes up with a notion that the white supremacy, the white people dominate everything. And, you know, just like Biden and why that's one of the reasons we call them ideological imperialists, Ku Klux communists, for the way they react and relate to Africans and other oppressed peoples around the world. The oppressor defines reality. That's where we get our definitions most of the time, unless we have access to the African People's Socialist Party, the African Internationalists, the revolutionary science. So the world has been defined that white people are superior because they're white. White people are superior because of all these other kinds of reasons, so that you had a response coming from part of the Black liberation movement that Black people are superior, Black people are such and such a thing, using the same process of defining reality as has come from the white people. So when in 1966, we had the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which I was a member of, had declared that the white people ought to get out of SNCC, and there were white people who really loved us in SNCC, and go and work in the white community. Said, this is where the problem is. Go to the white community, organize in the white community to get, because this is the center of what Becker called racism, etc. But and the white left was white people were so offended. They felt like all the sacrifices they had made, many of them, not all of them, but most of them, and here we've been kicked out, et cetera. But did they go to the white community to organize solidarity with the Black liberation movement? No. Like Becker discovered Palestine, they discovered Vietnam.
Yes.
Right.
They discovered Vietnam. Now, you don't have to tell us about Vietnam. Ask Malcolm X. Malcolm X was on the front line against Vietnam. SNCC. It was SNCC who said, raised his hand, hell no, we won't go. Even before Martin Luther King, SNCC came out against it. And so now, they go and discover Vietnam, like Becker discovered Palestine, and they discovered as a fashion to use it against the Black liberation movement, because this is the question. The liberation of Black people, the liberation of the indigenous people here threatens what it is that white people have achieved as a consequence of this colonial relationship. So I think that's part of what it is that we have to say. So that's a frightening specter. People here have heard me tell the story. Once when I was organizing in the Bay Area of California, there were some Africans who had been busting into white people's home invasions, they think they call it, and were brutalizing the white people, occupants of the houses and stuff like that, and very seriously. And so they had arrested some Africans. I think this was a Nob Hill that it was called, where the rich people lived on in San Francisco. And so this woman who was a witness of an instance where this person was on trial, they questioned her, and she told how badly they had brutalized her husband, the horrible things they had done to him, and they were horrible. And she said, I thought the revolution had started and they got to our house first. So there's this whole deep assumption out there, you know what I mean? This whole white people clinging to the stuff. Don't cling to that stuff. Unite with the future, because that stuff is the past. What we are talking about now is this unequal equilibrium that's becoming less unequal every day, is tilted certainly in the favor of the future. And the future is that of a liberated humanity that's being led by the masses, majority of the people. White people are minority people on the planet Earth, majority of the people from places like throughout the Americas, throughout Africa, throughout Asia, and what have you, throughout the Middle East, are fighting for a future of freedom. And this is the call that's being made to you in this meeting right now, to unite this struggle for freedom. And the African People's Solidarity Committee, the USM, Uhuru Solidarity Movement, are in the vanguard, providing that kind of leadership on the ground for white people who want to escape from Beckerism, who want to escape from opportunism, who want to be able to unite with the vast majority of the people of the world, because the people will prevail.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that can ever stop that from happening. So I wanted to just say that. And this whole thing about the church committee findings, which was, significant, and the church committee saw the FBI did all these horrible and bad things, and et cetera. I forgot exactly how that was summed up, but I do believe that that's something that we should work more and more. We should even use that for evidence in our trial.
Yeah.
This is what they said the FBI did. What's different now but us being on trial here? Yeah. And Becca should use some of that money he got from Soros to get them to attack us on November 4th, to help us get those witnesses and things like that we need, and resources to fight this trial, and to also participate, because we're gonna beat them. We're gonna go to trial. We're gonna kick their asses, and then Becca should be leading busloads of forces to participate in this process that we are involved in. I want to finally say this: that it's not like it was in the 60s. That history is moving in such a way that it's condensed. So it used to take 10, 15, 20 years for people to come to certain kind of conclusions, happening almost overnight. And there are more and more white people, colonizers, who are able to unite in the struggle against colonialism. I was late getting here because an interview that I was doing, they had technical problems, so it started late.
Okay.
And it was an interview with Glenn Greenwald.
All right.
And it's one of the best interviews I've done in a long time. Glenn Greenwald is not recognized as a leftist or anything like that, you understand? But he recognized this contradiction. He was able to talk about the assassination of Martin Luther King, how it happened a year to the date that he made that speech in Harlem, New York, at Riverside Church, where he raised the whole question of the violence in Vietnam and how he was going to be able to maintain that stance and what have you, and came, it was a great interview. It's not the interview that I would have with Becca, nor the interview that the other guy just did with Becca. We just cut that little snippet out that he did with Becca because it was rather revealing. Yeah. But the other guy didn't really want to cut to the chase with Becca. I'd like to interview Becca. You understand? So I just wanted to say that what we're talking about is not really, based on some kind of subjective intent of whether the white people and the black people will one day like each other or something to that effect. It's based on an objective relationship. And it's based on a mode of production within which all life is produced. This is the colonial mode of production. It is the thing that Karl Marx misidentified as primitive accumulation of capital because it never went away. When he talked about the happening to turning Africa into a war for commercial hunting of black skins, he even mentioned the war that was initiated against China, 41, 42, the so-called Opium War. He talked about all of the stuff that helped to construct this world that we live in now. It's an objective relationship. It's a mode of production that we have to contend with. And that's part of what it is that we have to overturn. Again, opportunism is not just name calling. It is identifying a relationship.
Yeah.
And it is identifying the fact that you have this tendency to sacrifice the long-term interest. And this is what happens within the colony. Yeah, all the workers are exploited. As Comrade Jesse mentioned earlier, we made this point a long time ago, but they're talking about super exploitation. What the hell are you talking about? Super exploitation. What happens to African people? What happens to the Mexican people? What happens to the indigenous people? What happens to Palestinians? That's not super, that's normal.
Right.
That's normal exploitation. But you recognize this from your perch on this pedestal of our oppression.
Yeah.
Right.
Malcolm X once said there's a difference in terms of defining reality from somebody sitting on the hot stove defines it differently from somebody watching somebody sitting on the hot stove, right? And so we're sitting on the hot stove. Our definition is quite different from that of Becker, who I don't think has ever even warmed his hands in the hot stove. So I just want to say that's my contribution. Thank you, Comrade.
Thank you so much, Chairman O'Malley-Chattola. That was incredible. What an amazing presentation.
Yes.
And I know, we're going to go to discussion. We're going to talk a little bit about, raising resources for the Solidarity Center tonight, but I'm looking forward to having a discussion. I know there are different things in the chat that people want to talk about as well. But Chairman, I just want to say that the thing when I first came to the very first conference by the party organizing the Solidarity Movement in September 1976, you gave a presentation on, you called it dialectical materialism, but it was really the theory of African internationalism. And it was 13 hours long. Yeah. So like it went and then the next day you started again. But the thing that I remember is that you were reading from Marx, you were reading the section that you just talked about on primitive accumulation, of what Marx called primitive accumulation. And you were, talking about that quote from Marx that, that included the, turning Africa into a warren for the hunting of black skins. It talks about the indigenous people, and and you just made it real. You made it real, like you were saying, of everything that he was talking about, you were saying that's us, meaning African people. That's what he's talking about, and just the ability to go through Marx and take out, something, the understandings that deal with colonialism and the reality of African people in such a real and dynamic way. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just, you just make it real because you bring the colonial question in it. It's not a book to read for, or political education study, or something. This is the real lives of the colonized peoples, and bringing the science into that is, it's very powerful.
It's like, we appreciated the Occupy Wall Street movement for whatever it was worth. But compare Occupy Wall Street with Occupy Palestine.
Right.
Compare that with the struggle of people in Venezuela, African peoples here. Compare this nonsense of we are the 99% with the fact that something like 80-some-odd% of the people on the planet Earth are trying to survive off 2,050 cents a day, and something like 50% of the people trying to survive off less than $3 a day in this whole world, and that's the majority of the people on the planet Earth. And it's not to say that that there are white people are not exploited, but they're exploited on this pedestal. This is Marx said that wage slavery in Europe requires as a pedestal slavery pure and simple in the New World. So if you want to end this damn thing, you got to kick the pedestal out from under it. This is what we are calling on white people, the colonizers to do, who want to break free from the colonial relationship. But unfortunately, too many have said that they're willing to live with this exploitation as long as they can get a piece of the action or the promise that one day they'll be able to get a piece of the action. Because after all, they're not niggers and they're not, you know, the indigenous people living under these circumstances. And so this is the thing that we want to break through. And I think this movement, this solidarity force, I think that the people who are with us now, I think that the millions of people who we saw in motion after the murder of George Floyd, I think there's a hint, there's a suggestion of what the possibilities are. I think the fact that the solidarity movement exists in something like what, 100 how many cities?
17.
117 cities in this country is evidence of that. And this is a genuine relationship that we're talking about. You know, it's not just solidarity in words, it's actual material solidarity. And Che Guevara, you know, and we mentioned Che, we're talking about colonialism. I mean, when's the last time, and people like to talk about Greece, the things they had going on in Greece for a while and some of the places like that, and compare that to the fact that the Greece, what happens sometimes, almost every time you see uprising crisis within the colonial communities, colonizers, it's a consequence of economic crisis stemming from the inability to extract more value from those of us who are colonized. When that happens, then the student loans get threatened, you know, all other kinds of stuff like that. And so then there becomes a struggle that happens there. And this is the most important struggle in the world.
Right.
And more important than the people who under assault, who are trying to win their freedom. You know, the price of oil goes up wherever it is that you're located. Every time the oil workers go on strike in Nigeria, something like that, that hits you here. And so people, you know, it's easier to hate a dirty Arab because there's the oil, there's the resources, this emotion that people are experiencing tied to an actual material relationship they have with resources that come from the people. Go ahead, Comrade. Yeah.
No, Chairman, go ahead.
Yeah.
Just really want to appreciate this. So I'm going to turn it over to Len for a few minutes and then we'll come back and we can have discussion. I see people are putting things in the chat.
Great, Uhuru. Well, I just want to thank you so much, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and thank you, Chairwoman Penny and Chair Jesse. This has really been a very profound discussion. Really great to be here. And I just want to let people know that we will be having a Q&A session shortly. So submit your questions in the Zoom Q&A feature or in the YouTube chat, Facebook chat, or if you're here in person, you can also just, raise your hand. And so before that, I do want to take a few minutes to tell you how you all online and in person can get involved in solidarity with the African people's struggle for liberation and support this work. So we have a goal tonight to raise $500, and you can go to apscuhuru.org/donate. And the most important thing that we can do to stand with the Palestinian people and all oppressed people around the entire world is to join under the leadership of the African Revolution. And that is what the African People Solidarity Committee was created to do. So we want to talk to you about how you can concretely support APSC, the organization that's hosting this event tonight, and by donating towards our fund for the Uhuru Solidarity Center in St. Louis, Missouri, which we all have the honor of being in currently. So the funds that we raise from all of these events go to the expenses of the Uhuru Solidarity Center. And this is a building that is owned by the African People's Socialist Party, and the African People's Solidarity Committee have the responsibility to develop and promote this as a real tangible place in the world to build the movement for white people's reparations to the African community in St. Louis and beyond. And this is the headquarters of the African People's Solidarity Committee in the US and around the world. And I just want to say that, our goal really is to keep this center open and flourishing with activities, and for this to be a place where people can come and talk about what is happening right now in the world and are looking for solutions. And we hate the colonial conditions that we see. This is colonialism, and the African People's Socialist Party has given us the opportunity right here in St. Louis to be the front of the African Revolution behind enemy lines. So we can go on to our next slide. So in early 2022, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement began hosting events here at the Solidarity Center, such as volunteer actions, potlucks. We had film nights, different political education studies that were led by Chairwoman Penny Hess. And next slide, there was a space that was set up for live broadcasts. And here in this next photo is a view of the main room where Uhuru Planet reparations apparel and other Buy Black Power products are displayed. And the center's grand opening was held in June 2022, which was really, really exciting. A lot of people came out. And in July of that same year, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement organized the Reparations Summer Project, which was a several-day reparations intensive that included presentations from the chairman, studies and outreach that distributed thousands of pieces of literature in the white communities of St. Louis. And then it was shortly after that conclusion of the Reparations Summer Project on July 29th of 2022 that the FBI brutally raided the 7 homes and offices of the Uhuru movement, including this building, the Uhuru Solidarity Center. So volunteers came out in the days and weeks following to help repair the damage that was caused by the FBI. Here's another photo of that as well. And the FBI attacks have not, the FBI attacks have not stopped the work of the African People's Solidarity Committee and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And it's critical that we fund the Uhuru Solidarity Center to ensure that it remains available as a resource that is open to the community and part of the Black Power blueprint, part of building economic and political power in the hands of the Black community. So here is a photo of USM members and volunteers who gathered here at the Solidarity Center to poster for the 2023 USM convention. That was last year. And here is a group photo with the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party and some of the participants of the 2023 USM convention. And hopefully it'll be double that size this year, which is coming up in March. And then, the work of the Solidarity Movement has continued to grow throughout the year with ongoing outreach and fundraising. And here is a photo from this year of the Uhuru Planet booth that we had in St. Louis. This was actually technically last year from Pride. And in August of 23, we had members of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement organize a really dynamic Moving for the Movement fundraiser for the Uhuru Wakulia, or Freedom to Nurture African Women's Health Center. And it was held at a beautiful performing arts venue in St. Louis. And then USM organized the March for Reparations here in St. Louis as part of the annual Days of Reparations to African People campaign that takes place around the country every single fall. And then here's another photo from the March for Reparations. And we, really called for solidarity with the Palestinian, liberation as well. And that was followed by a reparations teach-in at the Solidarity Center the next day. And at the end of November, we held our annual 24-hour Giving Tuesday reparations telethon to raise money for the African People's Education and Defense Fund and their African Independence Workforce Program. So, the Uhuru Solidarity Center continues to be a vital resource for people from the white community in St. Louis coming together to plan and to organize all types of events, as well as outreach and fundraisers for reparations and solidarity with the Black liberation movement. And we really want to call on you, everybody out there, to contribute to the work of the African People's Solidarity Committee and to contribute to this Solidarity Center. And you can go to, again, that's apscuhuru.org/donate, and you can make a one-time contribution, or you can become a monthly sustainer like Michael and Virginia and Leah and others who give every month to ensure that the projects in this building, are sustained. And we actually already have $160 contributed. That means we only have 340 remaining to the goal. And I just want to thank those who have donated so far. That's Leah, Lisa, Cully, MQ, and Stephanie. Uhuru. Uhuru. So again, you can go to apscuhuru.org/donate. And
And I want to put in $25.
Uhuru, $25 from Chairwoman Penny Hess. All right. And thank you everyone to that has contributed so far. Let's keep this going and reach the goal tonight of $500. And we're gonna keep announcing new contributions throughout the rest of the program this evening. So and one other thing before we kind of move on from this, I just want to say that there is another really important way that you can take action right now. And you can do that by joining the African People's Solidarity Committee and joining the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And the Solidarity Committee, this is the organization founded by the chairman and the African People's Socialist Party to work directly under the leadership of the African Revolution and to tell the truth and take full responsibility to stop the violence of colonialism, to win reparations and rectify the last 500 years and counting of genocide committed by Europeans and Americans that we directly benefit from today. So, joining the African People's Solidarity Committee is how we can do that from the white community. So you can go to apscuhuru.org/join, fill out the form, and someone from the membership office, that will probably be me, will contact you within 24 hours and we'll get you started on the new member process. And that will include some really profound political education and really getting to work, getting your boots on the ground and getting to work to organize, contributing your skills that you have and your strengths to the mission of winning millions of reparations to the African liberation struggle and building a huge and strong movement of white solidarity with Black power under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. So,
Uhuru,
yeah,
man,
Uhuru.
what a great presentation. Really, really. Wow, that was awesome.
I was smitten.
Wow, it must have been really good.
I'll put in $25.
See.
$25 from Comrade
I'll match
Brandon.
that, $25.
$25, and I'll go ahead and put in $25.
All right.
Keeping track of, hopefully the calculator, I'm looking at you with it. $25 from Comrade Kitty.
And I did too.
Oh,
All
wow.
right.
And
Let's get
those $25
close.
don't-
Uhuru. Let's see
Uhuru.
what we got going on here. So I guess I'll turn it back over to the MC, Brendan. Let me shut my video off here.
Let's go.
Right.
Back.
Okay. Uhuru, thank you
Uhuru,
for that,
Brendan.
Comrade Len, that was fantastic, and yeah, I would like to urge everyone as well, the greatest thing, you can do to support is become a part of this, join the Uhuru movement. It's just a call on everyone to join. This is a movement of, real concrete action. This isn't an organization like, the Democratic Party where we just say, oh, we would love to make things better, but we just can't because of, this and this and that. Yeah.
Right.
Gotta bomb people. No, this is, you can see the action, the economic institutions that are being built on the north side, all of the actions that the African People's Socialist Party is taking in the Uhuru movement as a whole. And we are now going to enter into our Q&A section, but first I would like to just kind of announce, kind of let everybody know where the viewers are tuning in from tonight. So we've got Louisville, Kentucky, Jacksonville, Florida, Gainesville, Florida. We have a whole crew of people here in St. Louis watching it in person. Oakland, California, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Indianapolis, Indiana, Fort Myers, Florida, New Orleans, Louisiana, Olympia, Washington, Toronto, Canada. So all over the place. And
You got St. Mary's, Georgia, London.
London. So got a few people joining internationally. That's
All right,
fantastic.
middle of the night in London. Right.
Yeah, thanks for staying up and being a part of this. So we will go ahead and move on to our questions here.
Yeah, I'd
let's
like
go-
to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me go through the chat and just say some things, because I want to mention, I appreciate you opening that up, comrade. And Chairman, yes, I just wanted you to say, you might have been checking it, but just to go over some of the comments, and there's a couple of questions. I have a question too, but I'm gonna wait to go through this first. So, so we have, I read the one from Kat Lawson, really appreciate that. They are learning a lot. And from Johnny Olabode, says uhuru to everyone, and said that Alex Suarez said that Che was in Gaza in 1959. Kat Turner, okay, uhuru. And Johnny Olabode says, white people cannot lead any struggles against imperialism. The oppressed peoples have to lead their own struggles.
Absolutely.
It's really powerful. Johnny also said, Ku Klux Communists. I gotta use that one, Chairman. And Yindu said, teach, Chairman. And let me see, our goal is $500 tonight. Paulette Dachil from the Leonard Peltier Ad Hoc Committee. Uhuru from Leonard Peltier Official Ad Hoc Committee. Uhuru. Uhuru, Paulette, great to hear from you. Great comrade. And she is saying, free Leonard Peltier. Thank you for being here, comrade. Oh, that was actually, that was a chat moderator. And Paulette's uhuru, my pleasure. Just heard from APSP in Flint, Michigan on WBAI for Leonard. Great to hear from him. All right, uhuru. And Stephanie said, uhuru, what an amazing and critically important study, pledging $25 to put it in. And yeah, so let me see here. Janet Coburn said, how will I be able to find the URL for the YouTube version of this webinar once it is over, or might you have it now?
And then I think
I don't know.
responded to that
Okay.
with the link.
Oh, they did. The link
And you
is in
can
the
go
chat.
to youtube.com/Uhuru Solidarity to find this and every previous webinar that we've hosted.
And then Leah, Comrade Leah in Minneapolis said, the longer I'm part of USM, the clearer, I'm sorry, it's really hard for me to see this, the clearer it becomes. We as white settlers, people need to relinquish our constant drive to be in control of progressive movements, recognize that our white worldview blinds us from the reality of African and colonized peoples, set aside our egos, and get to work under the leadership of the African Revolution. If we are serious about the creation of that world, of a world.
Of a world that is based on peace and justice, we must follow the lead of African, indigenous, and colonized peoples in all of our work.
Yeah, really, really appreciate that. And Comrade Leah, who's just an amazing comrade in Minneapolis, and also a very important donor to the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement. Just really, really appreciate you, comrade. MQ, the study was so powerful, sent $25 to APSC. MQ, we love you. I always have to say that because MQ is there for everything, and has been for years, actually. So just want to express appreciation, great appreciation for you and all that you contribute in so many ways to this movement. And let me see what else here. Sign up to join. We are, okay, we're blah, blah, blah. Oh, and Johnny is from St. Mary's, Georgia. Kat Turner is in London, which would be about 3 o'clock in the morning. That's really powerful. And all right, so I think that is a lot there, and just, yeah, so I really appreciate that. Discussion. I have a question, Chairman, and if anybody else does, and you can put it in the chat or people can raise their hands here in the room. But Chairman, you talked about how the world is different than in the 60s. And I was thinking about, you know, the first time around, the state waged the counterinsurgency against the Black Power movement, the African liberation movement of the 1960s, which you jumped in to fight, you know, surviving that and fighting the counterinsurgency, which was always what you talked about. But at that time, you know, we talk about how they came to Fred Hampton's house in Chicago at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, and nobody was around. You know, it was the isolation of the African liberation movement, and they were able to slaughter and assassinate him and others who, you know, Mark Clark and I believe one other person that was in the house. But this time around, you know, it's just the party had formed the Solidarity movement under its leadership. And so therefore it couldn't be isolated in the same way. And this attack this time had to attack the Solidarity movement as part of the attack on the party. And when I think about that, I mean, they did come at 5 o'clock in the morning to 7 properties, but they had to come here too. So it wasn't like they could just come to the north side of St. Louis in secret and do that in the same way as in the 1960s. And you always said that part of, you know, the work was breaking the isolation of the Black Power movement in the 60s, creating APSC. That was one of the reasons for it, you know, the strategy. So I just wanted to ask you about that, or, you know, have you comment and talk about that as well.
Yeah, I think that's extremely important. And I think the world is different. A big reason the world is different, not to exclude other factors, but the role that the African People's Socialist Party has played in changing the world. You got to remember that the real counterinsurgency movement of the 1960s that followed the revolution of the 1960s attacked African people in the United States and Africa, attacked the indigenous people, attacked the Mexican National Liberation Movement, ultimately attacked revolutionary forces all around the world in Africa, killed Malcolm in 65, King in 68. The Panthers were hit really hard in 68, 69. And then overthrew, killed Lumumba, Patrice Lumumba in Congo, overthrew and then killed Nkrumah in Ghana, killed Che after wounding him in 1967, I think it was. And so it was a whole brutal thing. They had mopped up, more or less. They had already declared, the Attorney General of the United States, that the Black Liberation Movement in this country, the Black Panther Party, would be destroyed by the end of, I think it was 1969. And of course, that's December 1969, they killed Fred Hampton. But what happened in the wake of that is the African People's Socialist Party was actually building. And it wasn't like, you know, and we were building off of those struggles that had been waged in the past, even though forces had been destroyed. I mean, we got people just getting out of prison today. And those who didn't die in prison, that they didn't allow to rot in prison, just getting out of prison today. So that's one of the things. Now the African People's Socialist Party, we exist in Africa. We exist throughout the United States. We exist in London. We exist in other places in London. I don't, Kat's in London, but I'm not sure I know Kat, but there are other people, you know, African people that are part of our movement in London. We have organizers or have a presence or have had a presence and influence in places like Belgium, Sweden, among other places. We're in England, France, you know, right now. We're in South Africa. We're in Namibia, Southwest Africa. We're in various other places all around the world. And then in the United States, we talk about 117 different cities that we occupy. That shouldn't be, you know, understood, you know, simply. I mean, the fact is that in every place that we are talking about, just in terms of the solidarity movement itself, people are doing reparations work, or they are part of a reparations movement. And the institutions, we've had institutions where thousands, literally thousands of people have gone through our institutions, and some of them have existed for almost half a century. And thousands of white people, even in the wake of the defeat of the Black Revolution, have gone through there. People hear reparations today, and it's easier to understand. If they don't like it, even they know what the hell it's about. But part of the reason they know what it's about because they can't go through thousands of people going through these institutions, and all these institutions say reparations. They go to the places that we've created, and so the world is changing, and also. What helps it is that you have this severe crisis that's emerging. In the 1960s, the revolutionary movement was characterized essentially by, certain kinds of advanced forces who were out in front, that we saw them, and they made revolution in Cuba, and they did incredible things in Vietnam and within the United States and other places. But now, just ordinary people have been thrust into a relationship with these contradictions. We have the whole United States right now is confronted. Everybody in the world can see that the United States ain't what it used to be. That the loss of power, influence in the whole world is very obvious. It's not to say it's not capable of committing the horrible atrocities that it's committing, say, like in Palestine, Yemen, and other places that we can do. It does that, but it's a defensive mode that it's in now. It's not this aggressive, growing, powerful kind of imperialism that it used to be. It's a defensive mode. It's trying to keep what it's already stolen. It's not capable of having these adventures where they continue to go out and steal stuff like they've done in the past. Not only do they have to contend with the people whose resources they have stolen and taken for granted for a long period of time, they have given competitors on the international scene too, who also want access to these same resources, whether they call themselves friends or what have you of the Africans and other people. They want access to those resources as well. And so, I'm not saying they engage in the same kind of piracy. I'm not sure that's the case, but the fact is that there is this contention throughout the world. And you have a situation where, just a couple of years ago, you had thousands of white people who attacked the Capitol. People defecating in the Capitol building and occupying the seat of the dummy who we just saw talking about Russians paying people to be for Palestine. Who paid the persons who defecated on her desk, who had to feed on her desk and whatever, who chased the vice president, through the hallways, talking about hanging him and what have you. So it's an entirely different world with everything up in the air now. We say it's jump ball. It's jump ball right now. So we have this. It's just a great transformation, and then we have, for the first time, the African working class has its own revolutionary party. And I say the African working class, but the African working class has a responsibility of leading the African National Liberation Movement that extends beyond the working class, but it encompasses the whole nation of African people. There is right now a Black Hispanic Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. It has something like 17 different organizations that's a part of it. So it's a whole, and now marching the same drumbeat. So not only were they able to kill Fred and like that without too much of a response, but they killed Malcolm. They killed King. It was Africans who rose up when they killed King. It was Africans who were responding to what happened to Fred Hampton, generally speaking. We didn't have this kind of response coming from white people about what was happening. But as you just indicated, this time when they came at 5 o'clock in the morning, they also had to come to the white community as well. Because what had happened is the African Revolution has now extended itself behind enemy lines. It's within the colonizers' community itself, and that's a profound difference. And the party has responsible for that aspect of it. We got growing relationships now that are different from the past. I see emerging. Our party has historically had a relationship with Palestine, with the Iranian people who were fighting against the Shah when the United States government was upholding the Shah that was imposing the worst kind of oppression against the people of Iran after the United States government had overthrown the elected government. Mossadegh had overthrown that government. We have those relationships, and those relationships are growing now with other peoples, et cetera. That's always been the case. So I think that's part of what we mean by the changed world, and that we have an ability now where there is at this moment a growing collective understanding of the colonial question, but not just the colonial question, because people have understood colonialism for a while now as a policy.
Right.
Like this is a policy that the United States has used in colonizing this country. This is a policy that Portugal used colonialism in Africa, and now we're talking about a mode of production. We pushed them and made it necessary for them to talk about colonialism because they just want to talk about racism and the ideas in the heads of white people. It's a real narcissistic kind of stance, that all the people of the world supposed to be finding a way to make white people love us. And this is the thing that validates the system too. Because if the system is so bad and you're fighting, how do you justify engage in a struggle to integrate into it if it's so bad? Right? You, in the same time that you talking about how bad things are, you fighting to try to get into the thing that's so bad. And so you're fighting against your own interests. That's why it's so important to be clear. Colonialism is the question. And we have to extricate ourselves from this relationship we have with the colonizer.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. And this is the cure for Becker. And I mentioned Becker, he's just, what's that figure of speech that you use that something represents some, what do you call it? It's a figure of speech, but Becker, how's that?
Nat.
I'm sorry, yeah, but anyway, yeah, a nap. Yeah, there was a point I was striving for that Anyway,
Well, I did want to
Okay.
announce that
And I
we beat our goal.
Oh, great. And
so-
there's some people to thank. I
Yes.
see in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Kat donated 50.
Great.
Yeah, we
And
also,
And Ninja.
Yes.
Founding member of the African
People's
People
Socialist
Yeah.
Party donated $10. Kat Turner, $50. And I think other people that we already mentioned.
Johan, Kara,
Oh,
Becky,
yeah.
Ruby, Maureen, Kitty, Len, Brendan, SG Alley, Sherwin Penny, Stephanie, Cully, MQ, Lisa, and Leah. And I wanted to quickly mention that we've raised over 500. We also have some comrades that are going over to handsofferhuru.org and donating there. Thank you to Kat Turner for your $50 donation to the Hands
Great.
Off of Huru Legal
Ooh.
Defense Fund
Ooh.
and Fight Back. And I just want to say, I did not realize, and I'm self-critical, that I did not know that the chairman was actually live on Glenn Greenwald.
It wasn't live. It's live now, but the
Okay,
thing-
okay, it's live
Yeah.
now. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Because over $500 have come in
Yes.
to Hands Off of Huru
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
past 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So as we're here raising $500 for APSC, the chairman is live
Wow.
twice. The chairman is with Glenn Greenwald, raising resources.
Awesome.
Yeah, he wanted to make sure that we gave him the information where people could send money.
It
Oh,
happened.
wow.
Yeah.
It's
And so the last
flooding in.
20 minutes, just
over $500 in the last 20 minutes.
Wow.
Flooding in.
Wow.
That's just the beginning.
yeah.
Great, great.
I'm not sure how we are on time, but we do have a few questions in the YouTube chat. If we can get to those.
Let's go,
Let's
Brandon.
do it. All right, so De Alessandro, I hope I got that right.
Let's say Yarrow.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, comrade.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's who comrade Paulette just.
Oh, he's
referenced.
talking about,
Yeah.
okay, great, yes, yes.
But they asked, didn't the chairman give a speech at an anti-war rally in March in DC that was organized by the Answer Coalition? So-
Yes.
That was a struggle.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Can somebody
That's
speak to that?
actually-
Yeah.
That was a struggle
Yeah.
to get. We had to fight like hell just
Yeah.
to get the chairman on there. Go ahead, Jesse.
No, I think that's actually Paul Karitis, who was who was there at that march? The person who asked that question.
I'm sorry,
That's the person who asked that question is Paul Caritas.
yeah.
Oh, I don't
Oh,
see
really?
them. I don't see them on.
That's
our
his
notes.
username.
Oh,
Sendero.
Gotcha.
Oh,
Okay.
oh, I thought that was.
Oh, Sendero,
I
not
thought you said
Sendero, yeah, oh,
No,
Sendero.
no,
Oh,
that was
Yeah, that's
probably
Paul
just my
Caritas.
oh, okay.
botched
Yeah.
pronunciation.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it was a fight, the comrades fought for that, they thought it was really important for people gonna be there.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say that, the presentation was well received by the people who were there and people.
Yeah, it's extremely.
yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and even when we talk about the difference now and then, I mean, we've initiated anti-colonial free speech movement, and that more than 40 different organizations and what have you come into that, in terms of the difference now coming at Chairwoman Penny and, the last period. But yeah, we were there at that in March. That was the month, March, was it? Yeah, yeah, we were there.
Last year,
Yeah.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. We also have a question from Norman Richmond. One of the radio hosts on Black Power 96, another economic institution of the party, asks, can you discuss the debate between V.I. Lenin and the Indian revolutionary M.N. Roy on the colonial question?
Yeah, well, I think it's really important that this has come up because there's a lot of discussion happening now around the colonial question. And I've forgotten exactly what session of the Third International that this colonial question was being discussed. And it's really interesting because Lenin had put forth a position on the colonial question that had been adopted as the position. And then Roy, the Indian communist, put a position and that was almost diametrically opposed to what Lenin had done. And Lenin supported that one too. So you had two positions that both of them were the former positions. I cannot remember exactly, what the difference was, but I think that Roy came down, pretty close to what our position is in terms of the relationship of the working class there in those struggles. But it was not just, I'm glad you mentioned Roy, because people need to know that these struggles have gone on for a very, very long time. And even Ho Chi Minh, who was a founding member of the French Communist Party. Yeah, he was a founding member. When he was in France. He also was somebody who attended meetings of Marcus Garvey at Liberty Hall in New York and what have you. Ho Chi Minh raised this question of the French communists. In fact, he criticized them. I don't know if it was in the same session of the international, but he criticized them for not doing a damn thing, doing quite poorly around the whole colonial question. And he raised the question of what kind of revolution are you talking about if you're not talking about colonialism? And he also said that when you talk about imperialism and fighting it in Europe, you're only looking at the tail. He said the head of imperialism is in the colonies.
Yeah.
So this is a long-standing struggle that has happened outside of Europe and the white world. And Lenin, like I said, he accepted Roy's position, and both of them were adopted. And it was really interesting because they were different kinds of things, And Lenin was the force who made a determination ultimately what was going to be accepted there. And he had his own position. He accepted Roy's position as well. But of course, I know Comrade Norman knows that. Yeah, that's the best I can do off the top, Comrade Norman. Jalali.
That was pretty amazing. We do have some more questions on.
Yes, yeah. Wendy Snyder asks, Uhuru, really important discussion. Will you talk about the Blue Book? Report from the Mountain. The struggle against ideological imperialism is the struggle against colonialism and imperialism.
That's a book that we actually helped prepare for this today, and we're gonna have a study of that next month, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's an
stay tuned.
amazing presentation that took place around the struggle with Prairie Fire for one thing. and you take on everything, the feminist, the white feminist movement and that, the whole question of Desi Woods and smash colonial violence and, just every front. That's a powerful, powerful presentation.
It led to an armed confrontation.
That's
The
right.
intervention of this white left organization, similar to what these guys are doing. It's an interventionist movement that they made that led to an armed confrontation between the party and some people who were close to this white left nationalist organization. And I should say it actually resulted ultimately in this woman who was a lawyer
Yes.
representing revolutionary forces, had represented Huey, represented George Jackson, and the same folk who came with horrible, violent intentions toward us, only to, be talked into changing their minds. They went to this woman's house and found her in a bed and shot her. Made her write a note saying that she had betrayed George Jackson and shot her. And she was paralyzed and she eventually committed suicide, So this is not little stuff that we're talking about. These interventions are really serious. They have serious practical implications. And this stuff between the African People's Socialist Party, the Palestinian Revolution, is similar to what we're talking about that happened, that got this woman, shot, right there in San Francisco,
I mean, I think that is such a good point, and it's something that, like I said, we want to have a part two, and we may even have more than that on this, because it's really the essence of why the African People's Solidarity Committee even exists. But yeah, these things that the white left and white opportunism can do so lightly without a thought can have consequences of life and death for African people. And that's why we say it's complicit. It's, it's a really, really serious. And do you have a few more? I know
Yes,
it's getting
I know.
late. We're gonna have to wrap up.
So
Sure,
Ajani,
but just an outpouring of.
they
people
keep coming in,
wanting to-
which is
Yeah.
fantastic. But, Ajani Olabode, I hope I got that right, and asks, I know the chairman already addressed it, but I would just like him to reiterate for some of my white leftist friends why the oppressed people have to be the leaders of the revolutionary struggle.
Well, stated simply is that the colonizers, and this is not an attempt to, characterize anybody in some kind of subjective way, they have a stake in the status quo.
Yeah.
Right.
Their life depends on the status quo. Their life does not depend from their perspective on the future. The life of Africans and Palestinians and other people depend on the future. And the future requires for us to destroy the status quo. And so they find themselves defending the status quo. And it's an objective, it's a kind of reflex they have. And so that's objectively what it is. Yeah. So, yeah.
Uru, and then
Right.
asks, Chairman, when do you think you will be able to come back to London for a talk? I had the honor of hearing you talk in Peckham in 2012 with Louisi. I think there might be a struggle to win before that's an option, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kat, they took my passport. I'm under the closest thing to house arrest that you can have. So they took my passport, and I have to get the white man's permission to travel, to go any place, to go 15 minutes from where I'm located right now. If it crosses the border into Illinois, but you can do 15 minutes from now, etc. So. But I do look forward to being able to get there. And as soon as we do this thing, I'm gonna be everywhere.
We're gonna win.
Everywhere. Yeah, as soon as we
Yes.
finish this thing, we'll
Everyone's
be
going,
everywhere. Yeah.
Around the world,
Yeah.
Chairman. All right, well.
So you were there in 2012, Kat. Good.
Kat says, we are waiting for you, Chairman, Penny, Jesse, and Akile.
Right on.
Yeah. Exciting, very exciting. All right, yes, great to hear from you, and I know the chairman will be back all over the world, London, Paris, and all throughout Africa.
Yeah.
because we are gonna win. We are winning.
Yes.
Well, this has been really, really powerful. Somebody's asking, and I want to know too, where to watch the chairman on the Glenn Greenwald program.
So it's currently on Glenn Greenwald's Rumble. If you go to
Okay.
his Twitter, you'll see he's posting links to it on his Twitter. So go to Twitter, or X as it's called now, and search Glenn Greenwald, Glenn with 2 N's. And you'll be able to find it.
Great, great. Can't wait. Gonna go home and watch it. It's really powerful. And, just really want to thank everybody for coming out. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Chairman. This means so much to be able to, to bring this to the comrades and have this setting where, we can be here and talk to you and you can discuss all of these things which deepen our political understanding of the world as it really is, not as we want it to be, and to be part of the future under the leadership of the African Revolution. So, Chairman.
I want to express appreciation being able to be here too. I mean, as you mentioned, some of the stuff, was written 40, 45 years ago and stuff. And I appreciate being able to look at it again because
This book.
yeah,
Love this book. This is
I
such a
appreciate
good
being
book.
able to look at it again because in some ways, history is catching up.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes, after
Yeah.
40 years of Chairman O'Malley.
Thank you, comrades, join the Solidarity Movement, join the Uhuru Movement, and we are in the process of winning. We are setting new terms for what struggle should look like in this country and around the world. So thank you so much, comrades.
Uhuru, thank you for that, Chairman, and thank the rest of our panelists up here, Chairwoman Penny and Chair Jesse. We're going to go ahead and move on to our announcements, and then we will be closing out. So if we can get that.
That's $545.
Yes, yeah, the final tally, 545. So, okay, and then for our first announcement, go ahead to that next slide there. So coming up, the 2024 Uhuru Solidarity Movement National Convention is taking place March 9th and 10th here in St. Louis, Missouri. As the colonial ruling class escalates their genocidal colonial terror against African, Palestinian, indigenous, and oppressed peoples, and anti-colonial resistance sweeps everywhere, all over the world, from Gaza to Burkina Faso to here in North St. Louis. Now is the time for white people to stand in anti-colonial solidarity and demand no more genocide in our name. Register at nomoregenocide.eventb.com. If we can move to the next slide. And as always, we call on people to join the counteroffensive to stop the FBI attacks on the African People's Socialist Party and the African liberation struggle. For more information, go to handsoffuhuru.org to volunteer, donate, sign the petition, and sign the emergency response pledge. If you haven't done that, please go now to get text alerts whenever there is a major development in the case or calls to action. So go to handsoffuhuru.org and click on events to see all of the upcoming events and actions. A reminder to tune in to the White Lies Shattered series on the Reparations in Action FM radio show and podcast. You can listen Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Central on Black Power 96.3 FM in St. Petersburg, Florida, or get episodes on demand at uhurusolidarity.podbean.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Search for White Lies Shattered. You can also download the Black Power 96 app. And listen wherever. So next slide. We have Uhuru Planet Reparations Apparel is clothing and accessories and more that is forwarding the culture of white reparations to African people. It is an institution of Black Star Industries. Go to the online store at uhuruplanet.com. Uhuru Planet is also seeking volunteers to join the team. And there is going to be an open volunteer work session tomorrow night at the Uhuru Solidarity Center.
Friday night.
Yes, sorry, that is
Yeah,
Friday night.
Yeah.
Email info@ahuruplanet.com or say in the chat if you are interested in getting involved. I will definitely be there. So I encourage anyone who's around the St. Louis area to come out and get involved. So next slide. So mark your calendar for the next APSC monthly national study, Wednesday, February 14th at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. 14 Reasons to Love the African People's Socialist Party, studying the party's 14-point platform. Register at apscahuru.org/study. Next slide. On Thursday, February 15th at 6:30 p.m., come to the USM monthly meeting. So register at tinyurl.com/USM action. And mark your calendar for the next APSC monthly web event. They are the last Wednesday of the month, so that will be February 28th at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. So you can find details about these and more upcoming events.
Let me mention one other.
Yes, absolutely, Chairman.
Yeah. On Sunday at the Uhuru House here in St. Louis at 4101 West Florissant, the mass meeting that we have will deal with this the case and the fact that the magistrate recommended that our brief calling for the dismissal of the charges. The lawyers will be participating in this. I don't remember all the people who are going to be there. But it's going to be really important. So we're inviting everybody to be there. And I think if you you can probably find it online as well. Where would that be?
Yes, it's you can register for that at tinyurl.com/Uhuru3rally with the number 3. I'll put that in the chat.
Okay, good.
Excellent. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I will be at that as well. So the rallies are always incredible. And this one I think is really important to be at. So, but you can find details about these and other upcoming events at theburningspear.com/events. Make sure to visit uhurusolidarity.org and apscahuru.org to learn more about the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, the African People's Solidarity Committee, and how you can become a member and join the work to build white solidarity with Black power and unity through reparations.
And I just had
Yes.
one other one that we will be really proud to be able to be part of an important event for Leonard Peltier at Bound Together Books in San Francisco on Tuesday, February 4th, I think it is. Or
February 6th.
February 6th, Tuesday, February 6th at Bound Together Books in San Francisco. It is going to be a big event sponsored by the Leonard Peltier Ad Hoc Committee. And I know Party Rep Bakary is going to be there along with myself, and we're very honored to be able to participate in that. Paulette, who has been on, will be there. Jennifer Jones, who is Leonard Peltier's attorney, so that's going to be really powerful. So anybody in the Bay Area coming out to that?
Absolutely. So okay, yeah, thank you so much.
Not one more year.
Not one more year. And not one day for the Uhuru 3. Uhuru. Hands off Uhuru.
Hands off.
Drop the charges against the Uhuru 3 and unity through
Reparations. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Now $600 has come in.